This is Healthcare Musings. I'm your host, Dr. Hesham Hasabala. Welcome, everybody, to Healthcare Musings. Happy to have you with me. This is our first episode that is sponsored. So we are sponsored. This episode is sponsored by Buttermilk Cafe in Downers Grove, Illinois. It's a fantastic cafe where you can have breakfast and lunch. Me and my family come here all the time. Great food, great people, great service. It's awesome. I'm having an omelet right now. It's amazing, humongous, the way I like it, with good pancakes, good stuff. It's a great place. Definitely come out and see and check it out, and come with your family, have breakfast. Buttermilk Cafe in Downers Grove, Illinois. So they're the sponsor for this show, and thanks so much for their sponsorship. I am honored to have Mr. Terry Cameron. He is a longtime friend of mine. I've been working with him at Sound Advisory Services for years and years. He's the ex officio. He's the recent CEO of the advisory service line for Sound. He recently left Sound to pursue other endeavors, and I am honored to have him on the show. So Terry, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate
so happy
that.
to have you.
Thanks.
So I wanted to talk to him because he's uniquely positioned to talk about AI. A theme of the show is AI and how AI is affecting the business of medicine. And the one thing, especially I think there's going to be an AI arms race between payers and providers. I hate the word provider, but there's no other way to say it. Hospitals and doctors. I think that it seems like there's going to be the battle of the bots. That the providers are using AI to try to combat denials, and the payers are using AI to combat the combating and to deny. And so it seems like I think my job as an appeal writer or a physician advisor could be going away I could see it being replaced by AI. I refuse to use AI to write my appeal letters. I do use it to summarize the hospital records because it's just easier to do it. It's faster and more efficient, and I still write the letter myself using my clinical judgment, but I could definitely see an AI bot replacing a physician advisor who writes an appeal letter. But what your sense is, given your where you've seen, and you've been in the business for a long time, about what's AI gonna do to the payer provider dynamic?
No, it's an interesting question, and I think I was telling you earlier that I've spoke before Congress on this very issue around the policing on both sides of the equation here, and the multi-billion dollars that is spent by providers and by payers, right? Trying to what they believe they built organizations to essentially ensure that payment integrity, right, is there for both sides, and ultimately it probably doesn't protect the patient, right? And the patient is caught in the middle of the whole equation, and that policing is billions of dollars, right? So even the most conservative estimate, somewhere around $50 billion is spent by both the payer and the provider policing each other.
$50 billion.
$50 billion. Some estimates are upwards of $200 billion spent to do that. And my sense, I'm probably more optimistic than you are, right? I'm not in the trenches every day. I'm not there sort of talking to payer medical directors and, trying to argue why they should be paying a specific claim. But in the AI in the hands of providers at this point, and payers have had that for a long time, right? They've been able to utilize that to deny claims, to automate their processes, and be able to then put things in place to ensure that the integrity is correct, right? And I'm more optimistic about AI in the hands of providers creating transparency, right? Creating the ability to know and understand. Payers have had the advantage of the longitudinal record. They've had the advantage of, kind of having black box of understanding of sort of the payer dynamics and benefits and all of that really providers don't have the benefit of. And so I'm optimistic that AI will enable providers to sort of have the data that they need and be able to make that transparent to payers and ultimately bring together payers and providers, right, for the good of it rather than continuing the arms race and policing each other. That's my view at this point.
I mean, you are more optimistic than I am. I had Jeff Alter, the CEO, sound he also thinks payers and providers need to be better, work more together. The system is inherently adversarial. You know, we want the money because we did the work, and the payers want to keep them. I mean, if you're trying to make a profit, then you got to, by definition, you have to cut your costs. So, and we are their cost, right? We're the number one cost. So, like, I'm not as optimistic. And you know, the patients now are pissed. I had Matthew Zachary on. He's a patient advocate, and he's saying 2026 is the year of the patient who are going to vote. And they're angry. They're angry at the system that you were saying, the patient's in the middle, right? But how, what is, when you say AI will help the provider, how? I think you had mentioned something. How could an AI system help a provider with respect to payer denial?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that AI sort of has the potential. 30 years ago, I spoke before Congress on fraud, waste, and abuse, and why, what could be done about it, and how we could make it an American Express transaction rather than and payment an American Express transaction.
Tell me more about that. It's very interesting.
Right, as opposed to, and that ultimately my point then and my point now is really largely around making sure that things are done up front, further up in the process, right? Make sure you understand the rules, make sure you have the rules, and make sure then that you're following the rules to get paid, right? And if those things are there, providers, by and large, are not intentionally trying to game the system. It's a lack of understanding of what the rules are and the multitude of payers who have different rules. And so ultimately, if that can come together somewhat, right, and not have it be adversarial, but you can understand that better, I think the only way for that to happen is for providers to have a better sense of what's really going on. And AI provides them the tool set to, I think, do that very quickly, right? They can understand how payers are interacting and determine what denials are happening, and then have conversations around how they can partner with payers in order to drive the administrative burden, excuse me, out of the system. That's my hope as we go through this.
The problem is the payers don't always follow the rules. Like the payers say that, like the payers won't even follow their own contracts.
Right.
Like, right. I speak to people in the industry and they're saying, we're telling payers, look at your contract with the payer, whatever it is, name a name. And they don't even follow the rule. It's in the contract. This is supposed to be paid here, and they don't even follow it.
Right.
And then the denials seem arbitrary. And then when you appeal, they don't even respond. Right. A lot of times they don't even respond to you. Right. They don't even give you the courtesy of a letter. And I called it out on my podcast before, and now I started seeing. Still working. Now I noticed after I called them out, maybe I hope it's me. I don't know that now I'm starting getting more letters, just explaining, and it doesn't even seem that they've read my appeal letter. They're just the same thing over and over again. So.
But that's my point. You're sort of making my point, right? In that I think at this point, providers lack the ability to have that information holistically to go back to payers and sort of make that transparent. Keeping, again, the patient not in the middle, but the patient at the center of what we're trying to solve here, which is reducing the administrative burden. And that AI has, I think, the potential for providers to have that data and be able to then present that in the right way to payers who do have the capability and the technology to make a bulk of the transactions very American Express-like transactions, right? If they want to, right? They have the capability and the technology to enable that. And I think your point's valid, though, that they're not always following their own black box rules, but also it's hard for providers to see that in the current midst of all of the data without AI there. That's sort of what I'm hopeful that brings that to transparency.
So it's more than just writing letters. It's really data. It's really data analytics.
Whoever has the data wins the game, right? I mean, that's ultimately, kind of been a long-term saying, right? And I do believe that AI levels that playing field for both sides, right? It becomes a lot harder to sort of, have a black box when you have AI that is able to see what the adjudication looks like over time and see the inconsistencies and determine and be able to present that back and create transparency.
Transparency. But isn't that proprietary on the part of the payers? I mean, aren't they going to try to protect their black boxes?
Well, at some point, I think the other thing that becomes a problem here, right, is that the lack of trust, right, on both sides of the equation.
The lack of trust is, and it doesn't come out of nowhere, right?
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, listen, I think there's been 30 years, right, or better, more than 30 years, but 30 years since I've been involved in it, where there is a lack of trust, right? There's a lack of transparency. And I think, again, it's my altruistic view that AI at least helps enable that for providers in a very different way than what they've had in the past in terms of tool sets to do this. And that the policing on both sides isn't really sort of benefiting the patient, to your point, right? And patients are upset, right? I have an example right now of a claim that's been going on for 2 years in my family that was billed incorrectly, and I continue to get a $10,000 bill for something that was billed incorrectly. I think even for somebody like me, it's hard to really sort of engage with the payer provider to bring them together to say, hey, this is wrong, right? It was coded wrong. It didn't get resubmitted. And it's very, very difficult. But the patients are the ones caught in the middle. And if we can sort of keep that in mind and bring pilots together to enable the administrative burden where we can agree, right? The administrative burden. Hey, if I do this, this, and this, it will get paid. If I do this, this, and this, it will get paid. And so if I verify eligibility, if I verify benefits, if I verify documentation, if I give you this or that. I was listening to one of your podcasts the other day, right, that said something to the effect that, some payers have suggested that their medical loss ratio is problematic because providers are using AI in order to document better.
Yeah.
And that may or may not be the case, but they probably are documenting what they should have been documenting, what the patient's condition was in the first place. At least we're not insinuating any fraud necessarily, but it's more of, what it really should be and what they should be getting paid for. And I think if they can build that trust and build that transparency and pilot a few places where not every complex case is going to get auto adjudicated or real-time adjudicated, but I do believe that 80 to 90% of healthcare claims could be predetermined that is eligible, it's approved, and it will get paid this amount right up front. And I think that we've got the next 5 years that can be done without a doubt.
You said that you spoke to Congress 30 years ago, and it's the same today. So, forgive my skepticism that it's that it's going to be any different. It makes great sense. I love the American Express analogy. That you're right. When I go and I use my credit card, it's at the point of purchase. I'm getting the service. The merchant is getting paid. You're right. That day. At the end of the day, they get the batch and it goes right into their bank account or that's never happened in healthcare, right? Even with Medicare, that doesn't happen. And it still seems like the power is with the person who holds the purse.
Yep.
And it seems arbitrary. That I did everything right and I coded it correctly and I'm not overcoding. And then they just out of nowhere say it's not medically necessary. And then they don't explain why. They don't give you an explanation. All I get a lot of times when I write an appeal letter is an EOB. That's an explanation of benefits that says it's not medically necessary. And even my personal, when they deny it and they just put codes, I don't understand what the code means. They don't. It still seems like we are up against a gorilla that is very capricious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the power is with the patient. That's what Matthew Zachary is trying to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that I know, is very powerful, right? Is involving the patient in this process, right? When it's appeals or denials, and having it be on behalf of the patient, and results are very different, right? In terms of thinking about it as a member and a patient versus if you just are two physicians sort of having a conversation about why this care was necessary, medically necessary, right? And I guess I'm thinking about it much broader initially to build the trust, right? To build the ability to essentially leverage AI so that things can get more and more auto adjudicated, right, in real time for those things that don't really have a lot of noise, like the cases that you're talking about, right? The very complex, oriented high dollar amounts of cases. And we start to build a platform that enables those rules to be much more transparent, less about each payer having their own rules, and more about how we can converge on those things that will ultimately eliminate the administrative burden and, again, keep it patient-centric as opposed to, it being a payer-provider policing each other and continuing the arms race with AI as the tool that advantages one-day payers and one-day provider, right? And so this altruistic view that I have, yeah, maybe it's wrong. Maybe I'm kind of thinking that 30 years ago, that probably was a very altruistic view without a doubt. All I'm suggesting is that with AI, I think it's much closer to providers balancing and leveling the playing field and making that possible in a very short period of time. Otherwise, to your point, patients are going to continue to get caught in the middle, and they're going to be an uprising, right? Yeah. They'll be the ones that sort of help us. And maybe there are ways to initiate that, but I'm not suggesting that this is a war, right? I'm suggesting you have to sort of go in that the bureaucracies here can come together.
Yeah, I mean, we are really if you think about it, we are on the same team, kind of, right? Like I'm taking care of the patient. I just want the patient to get better, and I want to get remunerated for the services that I'm providing. I don't think that that's unreasonable for me to ask to get paid for what I do. Just like a lawyer, just like a plumber. I had a carpenter. We're doing some renovations in our house, and I had a carpenter, come in, and he did the work, and I paid him. So there's not begrudging for me to want to get paid for the services that I provide. But everywhere else, I don't ask the carpenter, well, I don't know, this is not according to, if there's a problem with the work, then yeah, but there's no I don't have to, he gets paid, he says, this is my price, and I pay him. Lawyer, same thing. But with us, like last week, I had Dr. Ray Sher. He's a health policy analyst. He says health insurance is not even insurance, right? Like he doesn't think it's and it's technically not insurance. Insurance is it's protecting you against a catastrophic, unpredictable, high dollar loss. Health insurance covers everything, and that's why there's this whole system, because I am asking the insurance company to pay for everything, not just my hospital stay, but also my drugs, my primary care, the splint, the x-ray, all the stuff. He says that's not even insurance. That's why we have this complex system. But then if we go to a traditional insurance, like my house insurance, as soon as I make a claim, the next time I renew the policy, they exclude that.
Right.
I don't want to go back to those days before the ACA with all its flaws, right? So do you think the current health insurance landscape isn't even insurance? Is this why it's so annoying?
Yeah, I don't know that I would weigh in on the health policy sort of issues around insurance or even one payer systems versus others
Yeah.
that enable a much less administrative burden, right, on the very complex process. But for kind of in and around the revenue cycle component for hospitals and providers as a whole, I do believe that we can work towards kind of a very um, transparent, trusting relationship that enables some of the technologies that are there now. I mean, payers have the technology to auto adjudicate claims and put money in the bank accounts that day for services that took place that day.
Really?
They have the technology, they have the enablement, they're already doing it. In the cases sometimes maybe that benefit them, right, around their network or their retention of network or just better processes. So I do believe that that will ultimately sort of manifest itself into a broader context where payers are not necessarily trying to differentiate themselves on the dollars and cents that they're necessarily paying claims, but standardize the rules that enable the administrative burden to
To go
essentially
down.
be simplified. That's
Don't,
sort of
I,
again altruistic view.
don't you think, though, that's a good point. That would go a long way. And you could theoretically, there could be an infinite number of different rules because payers, even one payer, they have a different, depends on negotiation. They have a different contract with this hospital versus this hospital versus this hospital. It's not a standard. This is our standard contract with everybody. They don't do that. Like I know hospital systems where one hospital gets much better rates than the other hospitals in the same system.
Right.
How can that be? Aren't they doing that? Are they doing that on purpose? Because like it should, if what you're saying is assuming there's one rule, this where I am payer X, and this is the way I treat every client that comes to me that contracts with me. We pay this way, it's done. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's not that. Payer X has one contract with this hospital, another contract with this hospital, another contract with this hospital, and it's different,
Right. Yeah.
depending on the negotiation and what the pricing and
Yeah.
right.
And I'm not even suggesting that you have to standardize to sort of because there's very good reasons why those contracts are done in the way that they're done in terms of different networks and different providers and interacting. I think what I'm suggesting is probably more aligned with the rules around what information is necessary and needed further upstream to be sure that both simple transactions in healthcare and ultimately more complex transactions, and I'm not suggesting 100% of transactions are going to ultimately be in an American Express like sort of payment system at all, because it is too complex. To your point, but I am suggesting that standardizing some of the black box rules that really aren't really differentiators from payer to payer around medical necessity or around certain cases, and you're much more familiar with those than I am, but that are frustrating to both patients, providers, and to payers to a certain extent as well. That ultimately, that if we're able to get to simplifying some of the easier transactions, could that broaden out into simplifying and having standardized rules for what is necessary to get paid more quicker and faster, rather than the arms race that currently is? Payers continue to enhance their AI to do different rules, to your point, because one area gets solved, because then providers are sort of using the AI to find those rules, and then it's just an arms race to figure out who's and getting paid. We're going to get paid faster maybe and adjudicate faster, but it's not truly solving the problem at the end of the day. The problem is that there is not sort of transparency, and that you're really going after simplifying the administrative burden. I think can be done in more of a, kind of process that is piloted. And even if you take the example of a payer who owns providers, or a health or
I
a
didn't want to get
provider
into that.
who owns payers, right? That's where the best sort of opportunity is. That if you have a provider that owns a health plan, right? It's the best opportunity to create the model that ultimately simplifies those transactions. So you can't do this, in a big bang theory. You have to do this sort of market by market on a smaller scale, in my opinion.
I didn't want to get into that whole thing of there are people who don't think payers should own providers and so on. So I didn't want to get into
Not
that.
my place to,
I'm not,
sort
I'm
of,
not,
create those kind of criticisms.
I'm not gonna get into that either. Is my job as a physician advisor going to get replaced by an AI bot?
I think the bot, or if it continues, the answer is probably not, right?
Probably not.
Yeah, because that,
I'm surprised to hear that.
eventually, yes, you'll get fewer and fewer cases, and they'll be more and more complex, and medical necessity, showing the medical necessity of those becomes harder and harder, maybe. But ultimately, I think you need physicians involved in making sort of decisions about whether care is medically necessary or not. Whether that's further upstream, in my opinion, your current sort of retrospective view is way too late, right? It should be much further up in the process of why you're requesting the approval for this particular case and medical necessity for this. We know 90% of the cases are scheduled. They know that this is going to happen, and essentially there's no reason that approval can't be done upstream, and including knowing what the payment is and justifying why you're actually requesting that this case be done for this specific patient.
But isn't that the whole prior authorization?
It's prior auth, but it's prior auth in sort of mixing in the downstream denial rather than having that process be downstream. Because even in prior auth, you've seen this as well. In prior auth, you can prior auth and get approval and still have it be denied.
That's all I'm about to say. It still
Right?
happens. Like they don't believe us. They don't trust us.
Which is mind-boggling. But that speaks to, again, sort of the complexity of the systems as a whole that we're dealing with, both on providers and payers. And I'm just giving the benefit of the doubt that everybody is ultimately interested in putting the patients at the center and trying to solve the problem, right, at the end of the day. And in my opinion, it could become a big differentiator for payers themselves, right, to be much more transparent and to be able to actually simplify this process and be the first to market, right, if you will, around that. And I think some payers are genuinely interested in doing that. And I have a lot of hope that will actually come about.
It's a lot of food for thought. I'm glad.
You're less skeptical. You're much more skeptical than I am.
I am much more skeptical than you are, and I'm glad that you and I are friends because you can keep me, you can bring me, you can maybe lessen my skepticism. What else kind of, as we end here, what kind of other trends do you see in our industry, in the revenue cycle space? Because if it's really $200 billion, that's a lot of money. And they always say there's no money in healthcare. We can't pay you enough. We can't pay you much. There is a lot of money in healthcare.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it too.
That's the only thing.
Whenever.
Perfect. There's a lot of money in healthcare. It's just being spent in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Like, what do you? Where do you?
I sort of see this at real transformation, right? Is you're moving, in order for that to happen, you've got to move from retrospective to prospective, right? And be much further up in the process and heading it off at the pass rather than policing each other after the care has already transpired, because that ultimately puts the patient in the middle. In the case of Medicare, if it's a Part what should have been paid under Part A, but it goes to Part B because it's deemed that it should have been done in the outpatient setting rather than the inpatient setting. You put the patient in the middle. And so I sort of have this view of, real transformation is going to take some agreement that you've got to get further up upstream in the process and take care of this up there, rather than retrospectively having folks like you sort of try to fight it out with another medical director who has a different view and maybe a different agenda.
Yeah. But like the 2 midnight rule, they're supposed to follow it. They don't all the time, and it's you keep reminding them about, you have to follow the 2 midnight rule. They don't. They just simply don't.
Yeah.
And now payers are like, this is brilliant. If you look at it from it's maniacal from my perspective as a doctor, and from a philosophical perspective. There are payers that we're not arguing inpatient. We're just going to pay at a lower severity because they weren't as sick. So it's really like paying OBS. But it's really inpatient, but we're paying at the OBS rate. I think of semantics, and they think we're all dumb, like we don't see what they're trying to do. So again, it's this innovation and this desire to help the patient. I don't see it coming. The innovation is now it's a shell game, and it's rearranging things and changing the paint colors and saying, look, we have a new product. We're no longer denying the inpatient level of care. We're just going to pay it at the observation rate. I'm not stupid. Like, we're not dumb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
no. And listen, after 30 years, right, you have the right to be skeptical, right, about it. I do, you do, everyone that's in this process does. All I'm trying to project is maybe a bit more optimism, right, that the AI enables the data and it enables the automation. And if we can agree to what the rules are to a certain extent, right, to your point, right, then those things maybe become less important, and it's more important to simplify the process and put patients at the center of the equation. And leverage AI in that way is much more productive than leveraging AI on both the payer and the provider and policing each other in order to keep this insanity going, right?
Yeah.
And so disruptive technologies, I think there's some really good companies. There's some really good money that's out there that's leveraging AI in that sort of way and that sort of thinking. Rather than necessarily just the policing. The policing has to be done. The policing, it may be another 5 years, right, before my altruistic view gets enabled, right? Hopefully not much further than that. But to the extent that it can happen quicker than another 30 years, I guess I've got to believe that people are they're burdened by it, and AI gives them the opportunity to rise up and leverage that to do good in terms of this process and taking that burden away. So
we'll see. So we'll have you back maybe in a year or two. See if your vision. No, I hope. I really do. The adversarial energy is exhausting, right? And it's frustrating, even though at my desk, writing an appeal letter, I'm frustrated. Like, these are the rules we all agree to. You're just not following it, and it's very frustrating. And I can't even. And I went through it as a patient with my daughter for a year, fighting bills after she died because of stuff like this. This was 17, now almost 18 years, just over 17 years ago, and 16 years ago, and I know what I'm doing. I'm in the system, right? And so people who don't or who are sick don't have the energy to fight it. That's the problem. So I really hope we'll have you back. We'll see how it is. I'm very appreciative of your optimism, and I guess we'll see.
I appreciate that. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to come back. And but I'm not probably going to be happy to be wrong. So I hope that we'll be able to show some progress.
That's good, and I think you're right. We should always remember that the patient is at the center of everything, and that's why we're doing it. And so I hope you're. We'll see. Thanks everybody for your time and attention, and I'll see you next time at Healthcare Musings. Thanks for listening. Healthcare Musings is a production of Faithful Word Media. Sign up at drhasabala.com to get every episode delivered directly to your inbox. And please don't forget to give the show a 5-star review. Thanks so much.